Yes. Okay, Boker Tov. Today's shiur in memory of Avram Zichrono Livracha, but Meir Tzvi V'Racha Leah. Why am I messing up every single week? And I'm looking right at it. That's right. That's right. And refuah shlema to everybody in the world who needs a refuah shlema, except Sonny Yisrael. They don't. They can stay sick. Okay. And also for refuah shlema for Noah Bat Shirit, and who still needs the refuah shlema, but who is hopefully the next few days going to be transferred to rehab. Yeah. Yes. From on death's door. Baruch Hashem. Okay. We are in chapter 19 in the small version. It is on the bottom of page 117. And it starts with the words Omnam Kedei Shalom. Now, we just said before that where is it that we are tested as far as our Avat Hashem? It's easy to love God when things are going well. Pretty easy. You got a job, you have Parnasa, you have Shituchim, you have everyone's healthy, B'li Ayin Hara, etc., etc. Pretty easy to love God. When it's harder is when things are not going well. It could be something temporary. It could be something long-term. Morning. As a matter of fact, if you'd like, Eric, today, I know tonight's the art site, right? So you can learn for your father's show. The name is Baruch Ben Avram Liyat Neshama. So the problem is that in a situation where a person is in trouble and they're being tested in a sense. So what's the mindset? How do we get past that? Now, I will tell you that he's going to give us two approaches. One that he says that everyone could use, and one that's very rare. It's exceptional. And even the one that he says is very easy, in quotes, is very difficult. Okay, and we'll see what I mean as I go through it. Again, we're on page 117, the middle of chapter 19, on the bottom where it says, Omnam Kedei. Omnam Kedei Shalot Tiyena Tzarot V'Hadchakim, Koshi U'Meniya Lahava. In order that the difficult times that we go through should not be something that should cause us or prevent us from expressing and feeling our love for Hashem. As he said, that there's the test is, I can still love Hashem in spite of the fact that X happened, but in order that it should not drive away or prevent my love for Hashem, yesh ladam la'ashiv al atzmo shtei tshuvot. You have to accept and think about it means two answers, but it means two things, two ways to consider of how you are able to incorporate into yourself that in spite of X, I still love Hashem. One of them you already know. One is everyone can make use of this idea. But the second idea, those people really who are the top tier, like they're really out there as far as their ability to connect to God. The first one that you all know, and it's usually misquoted. Most people quote this as which means everything God does, he does for the good. Now, I say that it's an easy thing to say. It's a very hard thing to accept sometimes. When things happen that are bad, things that happen maybe that aren't even horrible, but are just difficult, to say, Kol ma da'avad rachmana, or as it's properly said, Kol ma da'avdin min shmai, everything that's done from heaven, meaning Hashem, the tav is for the good. Just take it on a simplistic, put aside for a minute tragedy, put aside for a minute horrible things, just on a daily basis. Something didn't go the way you wanted, right? Whatever that is. So you could have an approach that, bummer. Oh, well, that could be a nice approach. That doesn't necessarily increase your love for Hashem. It could be like, I don't understand. What the heck? God hates me. I've heard that more than one time, more than 100 times from people. God's forgotten about me. God hates me. I'm not important enough to God. But if you accept that what happened was Hashem's plan, and everything that happens is for the good, then that makes you be able to accept, at least on some level, what has happened as being Hashem's will. Now, if I walk over and I punch someone in the face, that's not God's will. That's my choice. Okay. But from the perspective of the one who got punched, that was meant to happen for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into. I found some of you heard my quote before. This is a digression of a digression right now. Rav Ginsburg, who puts out a little pamphlet almost every Shabbat called I forgot something. Galenai Vabita, something of that. It's a quote from Tilim, and he writes. He's actually an English speaker. He writes very deep Kabbalistic thoughts, and sometimes he writes them in a very simple way. And sometimes I start reading, I said, I have no idea what he's talking about. Absolutely no idea. I mean, I understand the words, but what's he saying? I have no clue. And he writes about gematriot and all kinds of stuff. 2 weeks ago, I picked up, it had like, sometimes they have a bigger, thicker thing they send out for Shabbat, sometimes like 2 or 3 pages. And I picked up this one, and the topic had to do with Hanukkah, had to do with emunah and bitachon, faith and trust. What are they? What's the difference between them? Because we tend to, of course, use them interchangeably. At one time, I will Bezat Hashem in his name, of course, give over what he said. That's a beautiful shiur. But it ties into what we're saying now, because bitachon, he basically says, kicks in when things don't go the way we want it. We have to have trust that it's meant to be this way. You didn't get the job. You didn't find the spot to park. You were supposed to go to Yerushalayim. Someone called you on the phone for 2 hours, and now it's too late to go. Whatever it might be. And I've also quoted this, I still call it a tape from Yisrael Reisman, who gives shiurim with literally thousands of people. Had a tape that the title was, Your Plan B is God's Plan A, which I love the title. And really, if you start to think about it in those terms, it makes a very big difference in your approach to when things don't go the way you want. And again, I'm not talking about the horrible things. Yes. With positive thinking, I believe that the future will be good. With trust in Hashem, I understand that things are good right now. Wow. That sounds like a Rabbi Nachman statement. Wow, that's very good. Okay, so whatever Hashem does, he does for the good. When you, even by the way, and he will be the first to tell you, and we see this also in Sefer HaChinuch, even if you don't fully believe it or feel it, if you express it when something bad happens. I just before I came in here, I don't know if any of you knew him, but up the hill at Mishkan Shoshana, the Sephardi shul up the hill. So there's a man who's been there for forever, who got a terrible cancer, and he actually passed away. His name is Shimon Shimoni. He's a master Balkore, like he's like the best. Just passed away this morning. Literally, as I'm walking over, I got the message. So, Baruch Dynamit. Now, it's terrible. But what does it mean, Baruch Dynamit? Right? Blessed is the judge of truth, or the true judge. Right? How is it that we could say at a Levaya, very commonly we read Mizmor Kaf Gimel, we read Hashem ro'i lo echsara. Hashem is my shepherd, I shall not lack. What does that mean? I think I even said that last week here. What do you mean you don't lack? This person's not here. Of course you're lacking, right? So I talked about that. I'm not going to get into it again. But when you start to say the words that, look, I don't understand, you can accept, and it's fine. And you shouldn't say, oh, I understand why he died, or I understand why that car accident happened, or I understand what. Already then you've lost it, because you say you know what God's thinking. Good luck with that. Like all these morons that always say, oh yeah, that the tsunami killed 20,000 people because some woman's shirt sleeves were too short. Hey, morons. Pretend to know you know God's thinking. Give me a break. In any event, so if you express, no, it's whatever it is, I don't understand it, but it has to be for the best because it was from Hashem, then already that starts to help you get out. If you get used to doing that, then that's something that will help you tremendously to deal with not just the things that happen poorly or in a bad way, but also it helps your love for Hashem. Because if you could start to internalize this idea, it helps that connection. We're going to see that in a couple paragraphs about Dveikut and connecting to God, that it'll help tremendously. For those of you who are familiar with, I've mentioned, quoted him many times, of Shalom Arush, Chut Shel Chesed, and all the Breslover's books he puts out, both in Hebrew and then translated to English by Laser Brody. Laser Stern does something else. He's on air conditioners. And he talks about this constantly throughout the books. It's a very common theme of whether you're reading Gan Emunah, Gan Bitachon, or Shalom Bayit books. It's all about accepting to the best you can. And one of the things that's very hard, I know for personal experience from some people that when a person's is getting older, they don't have a shidduch yet. And he says, look, it's very hard to say, but thank Hashem you don't have the shidduch yet. Why? Because it means that it was not the right moment yet. And it shouldn't have been. That person wasn't the right, whatever it might be. And if it's the right person, it's going to come back. I don't know. I just learned this recently. You know, Rav Sabato Shlipa in our neighborhood. You know, he got married later in life. Okay. He was dating a woman and they broke off. And I think 12 years later, they got married. This is the woman he's married to. Yeah, I think it was 12 years. Huh? Yes, right, Shoshana, right. So okay, we don't know if it's meant to be. Like you say, it's meant to be. But why does he say it's shaveh l'chol nefesh? Where's the expression? Anyone have an idea? Davar shaveh l'chol nefesh. So there's halacha. This has nothing to do with this, but I'd like to educate you. We know that on the Mishnah tells us, "Ein bein Shabbat liyom tov ela tzorich ochel nefesh b'vad." There is no difference between halachot of Shabbat and Chag, except things that have to do with food preparation, and then there's something called mitoch. So, for example, you're allowed to carry. There's no eruv on Chag because you might need to carry food somewhere, but mitoch shutra ochel, because they already made it permissible to carry for food, you didn't carry other stuff too. It doesn't have to be just food related. But what happens if the food I want to eat is something that no one would eat that kind of way? No one would prepare it that way. No one would do it that way. No one. So then it doesn't fall in that category. It has to be davar hashaveh l'chol nefesh. That the average person would use it or eat it or do that. But it's something way out of the pale, which we see also by Hilchot Shmita. You take something kedushat shvi'it, you're not allowed to use it in the way that uses the fruit in such a way that is not the normal way of usage. So go back again, 50 years, you couldn't, not grind, what do you call juice? You couldn't juice carrots. People didn't do that. Okay, now people do it now. Why do they juice carrots? Or why make that face? I guess they have trouble chewing. It's delicious. Good. I'm glad. Mix it with orange juice. It sounds absolutely awesome. No, thank you. But so you couldn't do that. You could do it today with the produce that was kedushat shvi, but you couldn't do it 50 years ago because that wasn't the normal thing to do. So davar shaveh l'chol nefesh is not just an expression that's used by halachot of Shabbat versus / Chag, but also it's a concept in Torah. What is the average? There's another expression that's used. It talks about in Masechet Shabbat about carrying. Again, when there's no eruv. And it talks about the idea, what about carrying something on your head? So, I mean, in most cities in the Western world, except that some countries like France are becoming a little bit more like the Middle East a thousand years ago, people don't carry things on their head. But walk in the shuk, you'll see people, baskets and things. That used to be. So they discussed a group of people called Anshe Hutzal. The Anshe Hutzal carried things. They were known to carry things on their head. So Gemara says, we can carry on our heads on Shabbat because people do it. It says, no, batla datan it's a hutzal, it's a kol adam. That they're batal b'shishim, so to speak. They're nullified. We don't accept it because no one does it, just they did it. So he's telling us over here that it's a shaveh l'chol nefesh. Why? Why is this something that everyone can do? It's very difficult. It means it's accessible. We can, in theory. We may not want to. Say that such and such a thing happened. Baruch Dayan Emet. Everything Hashem does is for the good. It's very hard. It's very hard to accept that. But the more you do, the more you work on that and think about it. And by the way, the opposite is true too. When something is good, you have to recognize it. It's a hodul Hashem ki tov. Everything Hashem does is for the good. Doesn't apply to just things that are bad, even though that's how he's putting it in context right now. But when things are good, and sometimes we say, Hashem does it for the good. We don't even realize how good it is sometimes until much later on. Even though what's happening in front of our very eyes seems to be very bad, but it's just really the real truth, or truthfully good. And I've used this expression, this example many, many times. It's a mashal of a rofeh, a doctor. A doctor who may have to cut off part of a person's skin, or even part of, God forbid, a limb, in order to save a person's life. I've used the expression many times, but I talk about the idea, I'm sure I've used it here before, of things aren't always as they seem. And I say, what would you do if you walked into a room, you saw somebody chopping somebody's arm off? What would you do? Most people say, I'd scream, I'd faint, I'd call the police. I said, well, what if you walked into an operating room and they were saving his life? Oh, you didn't say that. I said, no. I said, another one I say, I probably said this in here too. What's the rule? Not the rule. What happens when 4 cars come to an intersection? Who goes first? The one on the right. Emergency vehicle, the one who stopped first. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, every single one you pictured a 4-way intersection with a car, a car, a car, and a car. I didn't say that. I said 4 cars arrived at an intersection. What if they're all one row? So the first car goes first, because if the last car goes, no one's going to crash, right? Because we all fill in certain details in our mind. So what we need to do, that's what's part of it. This is not a mind game. It's something we have to kind of clear our heads off and say, okay, look, the way our brains process this is bad. No one's going to say that when God forbid there's a tragedy, it's good. No one can say it was good, but we have to understand that from perspective of Hashem and running the world, it was tov. How? I don't know. We'll find out after 120 years or tomorrow afternoon when Mashiach comes. I'm busy today. So let's continue. So he says, even though it would seem to be on the surface and cruel act, he's cutting off someone's limb. And no it's actually just really merciful. So that in the end result, he's helping him. And the choleh, the person himself who's sick, is not going to lessen his love for the doctor or his like for the doctor because of this action. Just the opposite. You'll love him even more because he cut off his leg to save his life. Now, do people who've lost a limb have this horrible feeling of anger and all these other things that go with it? Yes. But God forbid someone is a severe diabetic and they had to have something amputated, God forbid. Okay. And it's understood that that's the way it has to save their life. They're not going to be, oh, yes, he cut my foot off. That's not to be stupid. Okay. That'd be ridiculous. My granddaughter downstairs says, don't say stupid, Saba. So I won't say that. Erase that from the tape. So it'd be foolish. That's a better word. But at least he understands it's hard again to put that internally. Well, I had to lose I shouldn't say it's hard. This person had to lose their foot in order to save their life. But that's the way it has to be. Same thing is true here. When we think, and I would add a word, when we actually incorporate that into our minds, that everything Hashem does for us is for its good, for our good. Whether it's with our body, whether it's our money, even though he doesn't see it. Again, like I said, how can this be good? It's still nevertheless, it is for his good. He will not weaken his love because he's in dire straits or things are painful. He will not weaken his love for God. Just the opposite. It will increase his love for Hashem. I would go so far as to say that the person who takes this proper approach, and again, I'm not saying it's easy. Sometimes it's very simple. Well, like I use the case of the bus all the time. I missed the bus. Okay, that's really good. It wasn't meant to be on that bus. That's easy time to do that. But even when it's difficult, I would go so far to say that this is a tremendous recipe for good mental health. Because if you are all upset about something that happened, that you put on your new clothes, you're going to go to a wedding. Okay, you got the new dress or the new suit, and if you're going to wear a suit, and you go to the wedding, and you're on the way to the wedding, the car runs out of gas. I'm saying this example because it happened to me many years ago in Chicago. I might have had a tuxedo. I don't remember what I was wearing, but a suit for sure. And I was going to the wedding by myself. Andy wasn't with me. I was driving to the wedding, and I ran out of gas. I ran out of gas twice in my whole life. And it was on a main street, but it was like about a mile from a gas station. And it was warm out. So I walked to the gas station, rented a gas can, filled it with a gallon of gas, walked back to the car. By the time I'm all done, drove back and paid for I'm all schwitzed up and I'm soaking. I'm upset. And I'm like, oh man, this really stinks. Probably I did too. Um, so at that moment, what's going on in my mind? What's happening to my blood pressure? What's happening to my stress level? For what? Because my clothes got a little schwitzed up? Because I wasn't the Mesilat Kedushin. If I were, that'd be even worse. I'm going to get there a little bit late to the wedding. Is it because I was dumb enough to let my car run out of gas? Because that's my own responsibility. That's my responsibility. Oh, wait a minute. I was supposed to run out of gas. That was meant to be. I was supposed to come schwitzed up to the wedding. I'm not saying I felt that way. Trust me, I was in a different mindset in that time of my life. Very different. And but if you start to think like, look, what am I supposed to do? This is exactly what I imagine for a moment. If Hashem would come to me and say, by the way, Zev, just calm down. I want you to be in this. You'll understand later, but you need to be in this situation. Well, God told me, right? But he is. In a sense, that's exactly what he's telling us here. So it helps our mental health. It means it helps us live longer, hopefully, and healthier lives, not just physically, but mentally. Now, the other level, say those are the stratosphere or the ionosphere, I forgot which is higher. They don't even need to come onto this idea of, oh, well, you know what? I'll calm myself down by saying, everything God does is for the good. Oh, I don't need that. Why? They have no self-interest whatsoever. Their goal in life is to always increase the kavod of Hashem in this world and to give nachas to Hashem. And the more roadblocks that are put in front of them that would prevent them or slow them down from helping increase the kavod Hashem, or would cause them to have the lack of ability for a moment to bring nachas to Hashem, they use the opportunity to show, in spite of this, I'm still going to go ahead. I'm still going to love Hashem. I'm still going to do all this. And to show the power, the strength of their emunah. Like a general in an army who's known as a very powerful individual. He chooses the strongest, most difficult battle. Now, I don't know why, but General George S. Patton's name came to mind just now, World War II. Now, if he were given the option as George Patton to either, he didn't, let's say he had the opportunity to lead the invasion of Normandy or a little skirmish in the street somewhere in France, okay, what would he do? Well, he's the general. He wants to show his power and to show how he's a tactician and he can do. So that's what he's saying here. By overcoming these problems, I think the right word is vicissitudes of life. Wow, it's 4 or 5 syllables. Cool. I should tell my 11th grade English teacher the word paid off finally. He was a phenomenal teacher. We learned so much vocabulary that year. That's words that you don't use, but they're in here still, and taught us how to learn the word. That's a method I used to teach Hebrew, how to remember words. But in spite of all these vicissitudes, that they want to overcome them. It's like they don't want to have the challenge necessarily, but given the challenge, their goal is to push through. Not because everything God was for the good. No, because they want to show Hashem, everything I do, I do for you. Bring kavod to Hashem. This is true with all people who are used to the concept of love between human beings. You welcome opportunities to show somebody how much you love them. It's easy to bring flowers to your spouse for an anniversary. It's easy to buy a box of chocolates. It's easy to take someone to a movie to express your love. Where does it really sometimes get tested? When things aren't going so well, when you're having problems in the house, when it's a shalom bayit issue. So you want and you want to show, I really do love you. I really care about you. I really want this to work. And that's just a roll over, unless that's what you want. You just want to roll over and just be out of it. But hopefully, if not, to really try to take that work. And the more energy that's put into it, let's go to therapy. Let's talk to somebody. Well, let's read up on it. Let's sit and talk. The more you put in that energy, It's showing that that love is there, and you want to overcome all these trials and tribulations. Now, at the beginning of this section, he talked about the fact that ahava, this section on love, breaks down, and he hasn't gotten to this yet. He's going to now, breaks down into 3 subcategories. Let's take a look at the next line. Now we will explain the different branches of love. They're the 3 branches I mentioned. They are the legislative, judicial, Hadvekut, hasimcha, v'hakina. Clinging to God, simcha is joy, kina, which I'm not going to get to for sure today, has to do with zealousness for God. It can mean jealousy, but we'll see what it really means. Now, interestingly enough, I really like how Hashem kind of waves at you sometimes. I have used this particular book, this physical book, at least 6 times to teach Mesilat Yesharim to individuals, to in a classroom situation, in shul, other places. And all the time, I always have little notes. I add something in pencil or pen, and I mark something, I highlight something all the time. I use it as a working book. I don't just have the plain text. And I put notes on the side sometimes of see such and such a book, or mention this. I have a word that reminds me of a story, which I have something if I get to it. Sand pails. Almost 75 or 120 years old, this book said he wrote sand pails. Well, what was he talking about? So I'll get to that. Hopefully, still. What time is it? Yeah, I'll get to it today. B'ezrat Hashem. So I have a little note here. It said on this section about Devekut to Hashem, about clinging to God. In the introduction, I wrote, read page 336 in Mesilat Na'aleh. There's a book that's a commentary on Mesilat Yesharim, a modern book called Mesilat Na'aleh. Let us go up on the path. It's a play on words because Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. So I don't know what I was talking about there. So I went and I took out the book. I looked at it, and it is boom, exactly a quote of something I just taught in Tanya last week. I mean, it's insane. It's amazing how guys see you're on the right path. I love it. Dveikut. Who? What is dveikut? It's also translated as dveikus. That a person so much wants to cling to God. That's his entire focus in life, is Hashem. Now, does that mean that pay no attention to a spouse, pay no attention to children, pay no attention to studies? No, of course not. But it means that everything they do revolves around how does Hashem want me to do this, and how I'm going to continue to do this, and focusing on everything. All my energy is on expressing my love from Hashem through dveikut. Let's take a look. This is the concept he gives in Mishlei of an ayal who will ayala, who is constantly nursing the child, meaning that there's this constant connection between the animal and the child. It says about Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, anybody here, I'm sure some of you have gone on trips up north, you've gone to Tzipori, in the Galil. So there's what was called in the time of the Talmud, the Tzipori Elyon, Tzipori Tachton. There was the upper market and the lower market. There was again the distance. I was there, but I remember the distance between them. So this is the area he's talking about now. That Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, I lost the place just a second. He would be sitting and studying and so immersed in Torah in the lower shuk of Tzipori. Usdino in his jacket, his jacket was still up at the top. It means he was so engrossed in what he did, he forgot his coat or whatever else he needed in a different area. I do that all the time, and not because I'm engrossed in Torah. Okay, we'll see. He's going to give us another example in a minute. The concept here, this idea, the goal is to be so engrossed in the love of God at all moments. For those of you learning Tanya with me now, this is exactly what we're talking about, that especially in the moment that doing mitzvah, but especially davening, and more specifically Shema and maybe Shemona Esrei, be so engrossed in it, that if he loves his creator, he'll have this, will have this dveikut. Yerushalmi Amru, and the Gemara Yerushalmi Brachot says, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa Yomei B'Palel. I don't recommend this, by the way. that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa would be davening. And a poisonous creature of some sort came, the kisho, and bit him, kicked him, did something to him. He didn't continue that. He didn't stop his davening. What, you didn't know that you had this poisonous something or other on your leg? Marlehem yavo alai, which is an expression of a shuva, an oath. I promise. Because I was so engrossed in davening, I didn't even feel it on my leg. So I don't necessarily recommend that, but sand pails. Interesting story. Somewhere around the early 1980s, 81, 82, I don't remember what year it was. I think I was already married. So after 81, I don't remember. The movie, I'm a big tzaddik. I don't go to movies anymore. I just watch them on my screen. Just joking. The movie, An Officer and a Gentleman, came out. Richard Gere. And in there, he is training along with some of these soldiers on one of his first days of training. He goes through basic training. And one of the things they have to do is they have to stand there with their hands, I'm doing it here so I can see it on the screen. And stand there with their hands stretched out completely straight. And they have two buckets of sand in each arm. And you see the soldiers, they're one by one, they're dropping like flies, one by one. And he's standing like this. His eyes are closed. He's standing completely still, arms straight out with the sand for a very long time. And then on the screen, you see what he's thinking about. He's thinking about his girlfriend, his wife, whatever. He's thinking about the beach. His mind is elsewhere, right? So he is so connected to something else that what's happening right now, the physical aspect, is not even Baba Cheshbon. It's not even, he doesn't even consider it at that moment. Lahavdil, this is what he's talking about. He would have quoted Richard Gere had he seen the movie. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Probably has a footnote somewhere in an ancient manuscript. Not ancient, it's only 1700s. But that's the idea here. We're talking about. He's going to give us a list of a few psukim where we see the concept of dveikut. Now, in modern Hebrew, devek is glue, right? To get infected or catch something from something, the heat dabek. The heat dabek means it's really the heat dabek. We don't say that you have an extra dagation, the dal, whatever. The heat dabek means the word to become glued or connected to somebody through thank you very much for what you gave me, right? As opposed to the heat badek means to be checked. So when there have been times of Corona when they had the testing stations, seems like 100 years ago, Baruch Hashem, there was one or two places that put up the sign. It said you're supposed to be in this line, lehidabek, which means you get in this line to be infected. They meant lehidabek, to be tested. They just inverted the two letters. So this concept of devekut, of clinging to Hashem, is mentioned many times. It gives us examples. It says, "Lavat Hashem elokecha l'dofka bo, uvo tidbakun v'David amar dofka nafshi acharecha." All these are the ideas of us wanting, either being charged with the idea of clinging to God or saying, like David, I cling, my soul clings to God. V'inyan, what did I write here? Wait. Oh, right. Okay. Okay, I wrote, this is an old note I have here, but I'm going to use this also now. Example I've given, I'm sure, at some point in some of my classes here. I usually do this with students in their teens, but I'll just use the idea here. Think of someone alive or not alive, a famous individual. Moshe Rabbeinu, Richard Gere, I guess he's famous. Someone you'd really, really like to meet. Be a sports person, to be someone from Torah world, whatever. Someone that you deep down would really like to meet. And they give you the three options where to meet the person. You could talk to them on the phone for 1 hour. You could meet them at Starbucks for an hour, or you could sit in their living room for an hour. Everyone, of course, picks the living room. The question, of course, is why? It's the same 1 hour. It's the same exact conversation, but it's not. It's more personal. It's close. The closer you are, and the more at home and express this closeness and the feeling, the more intimate that conversation is. Same thing is with Hashem. You can be on the phone, like so to speak, just okay. Or it could be at Starbucks. Okay, you go into the show, you sit down. They even come a minute or two early, God forbid. That's called sarcasm. And I love it. I see some serial offenders. Anyways, and you dive in and you focus. Or Alvai, we would have the Beit HaMikdash, right? We go to Hashem's living room and we go and bring korbanot or whatever it's going to be when we have the Beit HaMikdash tomorrow. It's different. It's also why the Shulchan Aruch tells us that when a person davens, if they're in Chutz La'aretz, they're supposed to face Israel. If they're in Israel, they're supposed to face Yerushalayim. If they're in Yerushalayim, they're supposed to face Kodesh HaKodashim, which is like if you're standing facing the Kotel to like an angle to the left, which is why you'll see people down in that direction. So Chavetz Chaim asks, why not just say wherever you are in the world, face the Kodesh HaKodashim? Because ultimately that's really where we're all facing. He says because it's a matter of growth in Kedusha. You can't go from point A to point Z or Z if you're in England, just one jump, right? It's stages. So davening is about getting closer to Hashem, and it has to be built up in stages. So if you're here, you have to focus on this. If you're already here, focus on that stage. And that's what we're talking about here also. The idea of all these psukim is the same idea. It's the idea of us clinging to Hashem. To such a, what does it mean that what happens if you take two things and glue them together? They're literally stuck together. Sometimes it's stuck. If you use crazy glue, or if you're stuck on a Band-Aid because Band-Aid's stuck on you, it's terrible. All these jingles stay in your head forever. So it's harder than if you take two pieces of paper and just put them together. They're not stuck. It's very easy to come apart. But if you glue them together, you use really good glue, it's hard. And sometimes you take them apart, they tear. Like it's terrible to be ripped apart from that second piece. The same idea over here. The three uses or expressions of love that Hashem expresses for his love for Am Yisrael. And where do we learn these three from? From the parasha of Shechem ben Hamor. What was the story of Shechem ben Hamor? So we know that Shechem fell in love with Dinah, Yaakov's daughter. And in that parasha, in that section, there are three usages of the word that Shechem uses of his love for Dinah. Dvika, clinging to, chashika, desire, chafetza, also a want. Now, why do we learn of all the things from Shechem? Why? I'll have to answer that next week. No, because I have to look into it. I did know and I forgot. So that's the obvious question. Just like we start the day off with Matovo Lecha Yaakov, which is said by Bilam. Last night in my class last night, I talked about. You were there last night? I don't remember who was there last night. Anyone here there in the class? Okay, good. I can use it again right now. Okay, even if you watch the tape later. So we start our day off with words of Bilam. How goodly are the tents, O Jacob, thy dwelling places, O Israel. So very high. Okay, but also when a guy puts on a talit in the morning, a lot of people put it on wrong. They'll just kind of put on the head, close it, and open it. What is it? The bracha. Lehit atef b'tzitzit. You wrap yourself. That's not wrapping. What is it called? Hit atef. So talit goes part over the head, not covering the face, up to let's say maybe the eyebrows, and then they take the two sides, bunch them together. Most the custom is put it over the left shoulder. Okay, but the face is supposed to be open. How is that termed in halacha? That atifa, that kind of wrapping, is called atifat yishmaelim. The way the Yishmaelim would wrap themselves, right? So, what of all the things the halacha, the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo could have used, of all the potential ways, that's what he chose to describe how we wrap the talit. So I read this recently, and I didn't write down where I heard this, but saw it. It's beautiful. Who was Ishmael? So we know who his children became, because they're still cause of this grief day in, day out. But who was he? So we know that his mother Hagar, such a wonderful mom. She's dying. She throws him under a bush. I don't want to see when he dies. Walks away. What a great mom. Boy, he didn't need therapy. So he's dying. He's dying of thirst. And Hashem is going to save him. And tell her, Hagar, there's water. Just open your eyes. And right. So she opens her eyes. She saw water. And there's this commotion in Shemayim. What? God, what the heck? This guy, let him die. Like killing baby Hitler, right? Let him die. It'll save the world a lot of grief. Hashem says, Ba'asher Sham. He's being judged on who he is right now. He's an innocent child. Right? No, it wasn't a child, but he's a young boy. He's dying. and I'm gonna save him. Ba'asher hu sham. We walk in the shul. We all have baggage. I did this yesterday. I didn't do this yesterday. I said this yesterday. I saw this yesterday. I did it. We all say, like, who am I to stand for God? Like, I'm such a zero. This reminds us every day, fresh start. Ba'asher hu sham. The Atifat Yishmaelim, we wrap ourselves like Yishmael. What does that mean? Hashem says, I'm adding this. We wrap ourselves, Hashem's arms wrap around us like it's Yishmael. He's a child. At that moment, Ba'asher hu sham, that's how we come to shul. That's how we start our tefillah in the same manner. Tov, let me just finish the sentence and then we'll stop here. These are really, these dveika, chashika, and chafitza are really the main branches of love. It's this desire that I've mentioned. Hadvekut, clinging. So this joy, the nachas that comes from being involved in the one from whom you love. So we'll continue next because he's talk about simcha next week. You know where the sentence comes from? Mitzvah gedola liot besimcha, mitzvah gedola. You know where that's from? Rabbi Nachman, right? People think it's a pasuk. It's not. It's not a pasuk. It's not in the Gemara. Rabbi Nachman made that up. Plus, also we have Tachshov Tov Yeh Tov. That's also Rabbi Nachman. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rabbi Nachman. I actually understood one or two things he wrote. I have his book Likutei Moharan. I remember I bought it and I started learning. I said, I understand what you're saying. So I started going through it a little bit more. It's kind of like reading Rav Kook Lahavdil. It's not, I shouldn't say Lahavdil. It's different type of stuff. The stuff that Rav Kook wrote that had to do not with halacha is very flowery, very hard to read and understand because there's a lot of depth to it. And with Rabbi Nachman, so you have like perushim on what he meant to this. Oh, that's what he meant. But then some stuff is clear as day. When it comes to simcha, it really is very clear. So, Bezrat Hashem, next week we shall continue.